I've got 5 of my favorite Italian-inspired meal in a jar recipes for you today. These are scrumptious. I'll be sharing my spaghetti and meat sauce recipe, my classic minestrone soup recipe, my stovetop lasagna with bechamel sauce, a recipe for fettuccine alfredo with chicken, and my Stromboli meal in a jar recipe. These are all examples of the versatility of freeze-dried ingredients. There's nothing boring or bland about these dishes. They're bursting with flavor. They have incredible texture, and none of them are going to taste like they've been sitting on your shelf and all you had to do was add water or whatever. All of them are impressive enough to serve to company. If you're having to eat from your food stores, whether it's by deliberate choice or out of necessity, the recipes you choose to prep are important. You don't want to be wasting ingredients on meals that just aren't that good. My recipes are tried and true and family favorites. They're so close to what you're used to eating with fresh ingredients, you won't be able to tell a difference. You won't need to explain away a funny texture or flavor. No, you'll be shocked at how incredibly delicious these meals in jars are. And then when you make these recipes, you're going to be so thankful that you have this kind of food on your shelf. Welcome to the Freeze Dried Foodie, where you'll find delicious recipes featuring freeze-dried ingredients. I've got a lot of Thrive Life on my shelves, but they've gone out of business now, and you can use other brands in my recipes. So many of us have this type of food on our shelves. On this channel, I'll show you how I cook with mine. First up, spaghetti and meat sauce. This method is now my very favorite way to make this dish. I'm super excited about this recipe because it's legitimately one of my best recipes on my channel. You won't believe the depth of flavor we are able to get from these freeze-dried ingredients using the techniques I'm about to show you. This recipe's magic is in the meat sauce, and it's really a meal in a jar version of my spaghetti bolognese. You will need to store some pasta alongside your jar, as well as some red wine if you want to try this as I have it written. But that part is optional. But y'all, this recipe is a total game changer. You'll only ever want to make this version from now on. I mean, it is that good. I'm going to use a quart-sized jar because this is going to give me 4 or 5 large servings. Of course, if you don't need that much food, then you could definitely cut this recipe in half. Now into the meat sauce, we are going to load it with meat. So I'm using both the sausage crumbles and the ground beef. I like the combination of the flavors there, but you definitely need to pulse those in the blender before adding them to your jar. You do not want the texture in the little pellets that it comes in the can. You need to blend it, okay? And then we're going to add some of the Thrive Life tomato sauce. That sauce already has Italian seasonings in it and some other flavors. It's very, very good. And to that, I'm going to add some heavy cream powder because I want this sauce to be creamier and thicker and richer and meatier. So add some heavy cream. I do like to hide vegetables in my meat sauce, so I'm including some zucchini and some mushrooms, but those are optional. You do not have to add those if you don't like them. I love them in here. You will want to add the tomato dices. A little bit of that tomato chunk along with the sauce is really good. Now the beef bouillon is really great to amp up the beef flavor that we're going for here. And if you don't have that Chef's Choice all-purpose seasoning, you could just sub some salt and pepper. I'm going to add the veggies to a baggie because I want to keep them separate. I want to saute them before I add the other ingredients. So I've got celery, onions, carrots that I've put through the blender, and garlic. Now you could definitely put all of those things in the blender and blend them all up really small. That would work as well. If you don't want to use plastic, you could keep those in a little jar separately. I also like to add some Parmesan to mine. I know that Thrive has discontinued our Parmesan cheese. I'm sad about that because I really like it, but you could always store some shelf-stable Parm that comes in the green can just next to this, or just add some fresh whenever you make it. So this is the jar that you would keep stored on your pantry shelf. And you will need to store some spaghetti noodles next to it. You'll need about 10 ounces of spaghetti pasta noodles for this recipe. When you're ready to make it, you'll need to get out a large pot. I'm using a Dutch oven. Remove that Parmesan cheese bag, and then you'll empty the veggie baggie into the bottom of the pot. We're going to saute that first and make this sofrito, which it means stir fry. So we're basically going to saute these vegetables. What you want to do first is add about a cup of water to those because they're dried, right? They're freeze dried. They need to be hydrated a little bit before we can actually saute them properly. I think if you try to saute freeze-dried vegetables just in their natural state, they will burn on you too quickly. So put a cup of water in there, hydrate them pretty well, and then you can saute them. So I bring that to a boil, and that water's going to cook off in like nothing, flat. It doesn't take long at all for that water to cook off. Once you have a pretty dry pot, then you can add about 3 tablespoons of olive oil. And if you have cooked very much, you know that sauteed vegetables taste better than boiled vegetables. I mean, that's just the way it is. So saute those for 2 or 3 minutes, develop some fond on the bottom of the pot, and then add about half a cup of red wine. I love the flavor from the red wine here. It just gives a great depth of flavor. But if you don't have wine or you don't want to use wine, you could use some beef broth there, or even water is fine. And then you're going to add the contents of the jar. So that's the meat and the rest of the veg and all of that, the tomato sauce powder. And what you'll want to do is stir to combine all of those dry things with the sauteed vegetables in the oil. And then you need to saute this for about 5 minutes. I call this dry sauteing just because we haven't really added the water to these ingredients yet. And you'll be amazed at how wonderful your kitchen is starting to smell. Doing this dry saute is just going to add a layer of flavor to your sauce. So once you've developed some more fond on the bottom of your pot, you can deglaze and go ahead and add about 6 cups of water at this point. That will completely hydrate all of that meat and those vegetables, and it's going to create a sauce that we're going to cook our pasta in. Be sure and stir from the bottom. Get all of that fond and those bits of flavor off of the bottom of the pan. You definitely want all of that in your sauce and not stuck to the bottom of your pan. All right, so you'll want to crank up the heat, bring that up to a boil, and then lower your heat back down. I ended up at a 4 out of 10 on my stove. You'll want it at a good boil, and then you can add about 10 ounces of spaghetti that you have broken in half. And just gently submerge that. Make sure everything is under the liquid, and then leave it alone for 60 seconds. Just need like 1 minute for it to start to absorb some of that liquid. And then kind of move around your spaghetti push it from the bottom, get that sauce kind of in between the spaghetti noodles, then cover your pot and leave it alone for 5 minutes. And after 5 minutes, take off the lid and gently, very gently, because your noodles will still be quite brittle here, stir it from the bottom. You're just wanting to make sure that your spaghetti is not sticking too badly. Stir it around, submerge all the pasta again, and cover it one more time. Give it 5 more minutes, cooking on about a 4 out of 10 on your stove, cooking covered, and then stir. And you'll notice at this point that the pasta is quite a bit more tender and you're able to stir it without worrying about it breaking. Stir from the bottom really well. I had quite a bit of sticking. My pasta was sticking quite a bit, so I had to kind of scrape it there. It needs about 5 more minutes of cooking with the lid off, and I did not have enough liquid at that point. So I added 1 cup more of water, and then I just kind of stirred it around and let it go for about 5 more minutes, uncovered on the stove, stirred it every couple minutes, and at this point, my pasta was nice and tender. If you need to, you can always add more water and let it cook longer if you need to. But mine was great. I gave it a taste test. I'm testing not only for seasonings, but really for tenderness at this point. Mine was nice and tender, so I went ahead and added that little baggie of Parmesan cheese, and I just gave it a stir and just let that melt. I turned off my stove, and the residual heat melted that Parmesan. I put the lid on there and let it sit for about a minute or two, and then the Parmesan cheese was nice and melted, and the spaghetti is ready. I mean, just look at the texture. It's so nice and thick and meaty. Isn't that gorgeous? And the proportion of meat to sauce to pasta is perfect. This meat sauce is wonderful. It's loaded with flavor. This is really a bolognese sauce, but not everybody knows really what that is. It's more like a meatier, thicker, creamier, like a ragu, and it's meat based. So it's different than just a spaghetti sauce. But look at all that meat down in there. Y'all, I'm just telling you what, this is an amazing recipe. And up next is a recipe for a meal in a jar version of minestrone. Y'all, this recipe is super easy, really tasty, and it's a just add water recipe. Minestrone is a loaded vegetable soup. Now, some people put meat in it, some people don't. I'm going to do a vegetarian version of it today, but it's totally up to you. You can put whatever vegetables you like in there or leave out anything that I put in that you don't like. Just leave it out. Make it yours. Taste is very personal. Your kitchen, your rules, okay? But I am going to recommend the ditalini pasta or elbows or some sort of a small pasta. Gosh, just look at all these. I've got zucchini and kale, tomatoes, potatoes, the beans, the tomato powder, celery, onions, carrots. The beef bouillon that Thrive Life puts out is a vegetarian bouillon. And then I've got lots of different spices and seasonings. I kind of make my own Italian seasoning using different spices. So let me show you how I put it together. I'm going to start with a quart-sized jar because I want 4 good-sized servings of this minestrone soup today. But if you are only feeding 1 or 2, you could easily scale this recipe down and put it in a pint-sized jar. You can just do the math and scale it down. It doesn't really matter what order you put the ingredients in. I'm kind of just making layers of colors here. So I started with our red beans. If you don't have the Thrive Life red beans, I don't think they sell them anymore. You can use black beans or pinto beans, whatever you have, just so they're the instant beans, the ones that refresh pretty immediately. And then I've got lots of green things, including kale, which, by the way, I love in this, and celery and zucchini. Oh, my word. I love our zucchini, y'all. It tastes so good. And here comes my white layer. I've got potatoes and onions and garlic. Can you tell this is going to taste good? I mean, it's got really yummy ingredients so far, right? Every once in a while, you might give your jar a little shimmy, shimmy, shake, shake, and make sure you settle those ingredients. All right, there goes the pasta. I did 3/4 cup of that ditalini pasta. And then these powders are going to settle into the spaces of the pasta. That mushroom powder is just our Thrive Life mushrooms that I put in the blender and powdered up. I think it gives great flavor without any kind of a weird texture. Some people don't like the texture of mushrooms. Putting tomato powder is the equivalent of putting tomato paste in there. All right, here's the deal with the seasonings. I like to make my own Italian seasonings because I do not like the flavor of dried basil, but I like the flavor of freeze-dried basil. There's a huge difference in flavor, and I just discovered that recently. To me, dried basil tastes bitter, but freeze-dried basil is really nice and sweet. So that's why I like to do the Lighthouse brand of freeze-dried basil. Lots of other good seasonings here. We've got rosemary and thyme and a little bit of oregano. There's that Worcestershire powder. It's just a really nice, deep flavor. It really elevates things in this dish. I recommend it. I just realized that Worcestershire sauce is not actually vegetarian. So let me rethink that. If you're trying to keep this vegetarian, just leave that out. But if not, it's really good. I like to keep the Parmesan separate because I like to add it in later. Oh yeah, and I forgot the bay leaves. Put a couple of bay leaves in there first and then put the baggie of Parmesan and then you're good to go. There's an oxygen absorber if you want to store this for the long term. But of course, I'm not going to do that. I'm about to make this for you. I will show you how easy and simple this is. It cooks up very quickly. Isn't that a pretty jar? Love all the layers of colors. So this is what you could keep on your pantry shelf. With traditional minestrone, the vegetables they use are typically whatever vegetables are in season. That's why minestrone can be different each time it's made. And when you're ready to make this, you'll get out a large soup pot. I'm using my Dutch oven. And it's another dump and go recipe. So all you really need to do is set that baggie of Parmesan to the side. We'll put that in later and dump the contents of the jar into your soup pot and then add 8 cups of water, at least 8 cups of water. When you see the end product, you'll be able to tell whether or not you want to add more here. I did 8 because I actually like my minestrone really thick, but if you want more broth, just add 9 or 10 cups at the beginning. You'll see what I mean later. Give that a good stir. Just make sure everything is nice and mixed in there. Turn your heat to probably a medium high or so and bring this to a boil. Your kitchen will start to smell really good about right now. Once you bring this to a boil, all you have to do is reduce your heat to probably around a medium. I ended up at a 5 out of 10 on my stove because you want to continue to boil this. You've got pasta in there that needs to cook, as well as the beans that need to rehydrate. So just let it simmer for probably 15 minutes on medium. You'll notice the longer it cooks, the darker the soup will become. So those flavors are just developing in there. The seasonings are really coming to life. Everything just gets better and better. After about 15 minutes, give it a taste and see where you are as far as number 1, seasonings, and number 2, tenderness. Make sure you taste for the carrots, the pasta, and the beans. Those 3 things are the things that will take the longest. And then fish out your bay leaves. And now it's time to add that Parmesan cheese. You can turn off the heat and add the Parmesan. I like to give it a stir, make sure it's incorporated in there. I just cover that. I put a lid on it and cover it and let it stand for about 5 minutes. And during that time, not only will your Parmesan melt, but also the pasta will continue to absorb that yummy flavored broth and everything will thicken up. So this is what I was talking about at the beginning. If this is too thick for you, if you like more broth than that, then probably add 9 or 10 cups of broth at the beginning. All right, it's ready to serve up at this point. and it's just a lovely bowl of soup. But you can make it even better if you will add these things. Now, don't worry if you don't have them, but if you do, just add a few fresh herbs. I am adding fresh basil, fresh rosemary, and fresh thyme. I just have them growing out back in a container. Like I said, don't worry if you don't have those. I'm also sprinkling on some fresh Parmesan, and this is my favorite addition here, olive oil. Give it a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil and a crank of black pepper. I think that right there will help to elevate this soup and just take it over the top. If you'll remember, we didn't really saute anything, right? We didn't saute the vegetables like you usually do when you cook minestrone. So there's no oil in this whatsoever. So I think a little bit of olive oil really elevates this dish. Isn't it beautiful? I just thought it was so pretty. The pasta's great, the beans, the vegetables. It's a fantastic soup, y'all. See how nice and thick it is? And that Parmesan has melted in there. Indeed. That is a good bite of soup right there. Feel free to adjust the seasonings, add more salt if you need it, add more herbs, whatever you like. Make it yours. All right, up next, I've got a recipe for a stovetop lasagna with a bechamel sauce instead of a traditional ricotta cheese layer. When I was growing up, my mom made kind of a traditional lasagna. She used the layer method with noodles and then like a meat sauce. There was always mozzarella, and then there was a ricotta cheese layer. And in that ricotta, she would add an egg and maybe some basil and oregano, some Parmesan cheese. But it was like a very traditional lasagna. That's the one I grew up with. Well, Drew and I had gone to a new restaurant up the road, and instead of the ricotta layer, they used a bechamel sauce, and I just thought it was fantastic. So that's where I got the idea for this recipe. Now, I do have a copycat recipe for the bechamel sauce on my channel already. All right, if you're going to do this entire thing with freeze-dried ingredients, you're going to need 2 jars. You'll need a quart jar and a pint-sized jar. But if you want to use like fresh mozzarella cheese or just store-bought freshly grated mozzarella, you do not need the second jar, that pint-sized jar. I like to put my meat in the blender because I like the texture better, but it's just a texture thing for this recipe. If you don't mind the texture of the pellets that the beef and the sausage comes in, then you do not have to blend this. I pulsed it in the blender to get it smaller, but that's not necessary. Sometimes I say you need to do that in order for it to refresh in time, but that's not the case this time. You can do whichever one you prefer. Now, I like some chunks of tomato in my marinara sauce, so I added some tomatoes. But the mushrooms and the zucchini, that's just extra, just bonus veggies that I like to put in my meat sauce. Those are optional. Now, you definitely want to keep your bechamel sauce separate. And so that's what I'm doing here. The bechamel needs to cook separately, and then it's layered in the lasagna, so you do have to put it in a baggie to keep it separate. And I do like to add a little bit of nutmeg to my bechamel sauce. I learned from watching the Food Network years ago that nutmeg and cream pair very nicely with one another. You know, now that I've made this a couple of times, I think I might change my mind on this part of it. I'll tell you why. So I'm putting half a cup of our tomato sauce into a baggie, and I'm kind of keeping that separate. I don't know that you actually need to do that step. I think next time what I'll do is I'll put that half a cup of tomato sauce, that's Thrive Life tomato sauce, in with the meat mixture, because I don't think you need to keep it separate. I was wanting to kind of saute that meat and get a little bit of flavor going on that and then add the tomato sauce to it. But now that I've made it, I don't think that it made that much of a difference, and it just caused extra work. So anyway, It's up to you. You can either keep it separate like I'm doing in the video, or you can add the tomato sauce to the meat mixture. Now here's the jar of cheese. So that's what I meant. If you're not going to use freeze-dried cheese here, you can just eliminate that second jar and remind yourself to make sure you have mozzarella cheese in the fridge when you want to make this. Here is what you could store on your pantry shelf. I just think those layers are really pretty in that quart jar. That's just a really nice looking jar there. But don't forget, you are going to have a box of that oven-ready lasagna or pasta sheets to store alongside your jars. And be sure to check the expiration date on your oven-ready lasagna sheets. Mine had an expiration date of 6 months out. So I'm going to put a note on the lid of my jar and make sure that I use it by that date. So look at all the stuff you have to get out in order to make this. So yeah, I'm not attempting this on a weeknight. This is going to take quite a bit of time to put together, and there's lots of dishes that get dirty, okay? A large skillet, at least a medium-sized saucepan, and a couple of containers. Y'all, I don't even know what I was thinking here. You do not need to put that in a different container. Just add the water straight to the jar and shake it up. Now, I added 2/3 of a cup of water, and that was too much, so don't do that. You only need probably about half a cup of water to refresh that amount of cheese. And then you can just set that to the side. So you'll open up the quart-sized jar and then remove the bag or the bags if you have the tomato sauce separate. You'll prepare those in a minute. Go ahead and empty the contents of the jar into the large skillet. So that's the meat and the vegetables. It needs about 1.5 to 2 cups of water. Now, if you are including the tomato sauce in there with it, then it needs 2 cups of water on its own. So you'll add about 4 cups of water if that's the case. And I had kept mine separate, so I'm adding it to 2 cups of water and giving it a really good stir. Thrive Life tomato sauce is really delicious. It already has the Italian seasonings in it, and I really like the flavor of it. Bring that to a boil. Meanwhile, you can get your bechamel sauce started. Just put that into a medium-sized pot and then add 2 cups of water to that. And then whisk that to combine. And bechamel sauce is just a white cream sauce, and it's so good. Meanwhile, I just stirred my meat mixture to make sure it was refreshing really nicely. And I kind of just went back and forth between the bechamel and the meat sauce. Okay, I checked on my mozzarella and see, it's just too wet. I put too much water in there. It's a little bit gloopy or something. Yeah, that was just too much water. Okay, this is when I thought, yeah, my meat is ready for the tomato sauce to be added to it. And I was about to do that, and I realized, oh dear, my bechamel sauce is like vigorously bubbling, and it kind of jumped out of the pan. So yeah, just keep an eye on that. It doesn't take very long for it to get thick and ready, and then just remove it from the heat. All right, so I added my tomato sauce to the meat mixture. And then I just stirred to combine and let that go on kind of a medium-low heat until it got to the right consistency. All right, give your bechamel a taste. I thought mine needed a little bit of something extra, so I added some garlic powder, and I think I add some salt too. I misplaced my whisk or something. I don't know why I have a different spatula in there. And then I added a little bit of oregano. The bechamel sauce that I used in this video is actually the Thrive Life brand, and it tastes just a little bit different than my homemade version, and I had to add a little bit of seasoning to it. As I was heating that meat sauce, it kind of tended to jump out of the pan at me, and I didn't want to get my stovetop any dirtier than it already was. So I do like that screen. Be sure to taste your sauces and feel free to adjust. I thought mine needed some salt, and you can add more Italian seasoning to that. The Thrivalist tomato sauce already has some in there. It's a really nice flavor. But yeah, be sure to give these things a taste and make all the adjustments you want to make. When it gets to this consistency, that's far enough. You don't want to dry out this sauce too much, because when you layer in the pasta sheets, they actually need the moisture from the sauces to cook. So don't get it too dry. Get out all of your ingredients and get ready to start layering. I'm going to go ahead and do this as a stovetop or a skillet lasagna. I have a couple of subscribers that really don't use an oven to do most of their cooking. So I wanted to go ahead and show you how to do this on the stovetop. Of course, you could put this in a casserole dish, or if you use a stainless steel skillet like I do, it's oven safe. So you could just layer this and put this in the oven if you prefer. But I love doing it on the stovetop. It cooks up beautifully and it doesn't take as long because your pan is already hot and your ingredients are already hot, and I think it's just easier to do. As you layer in your pasta sheets, just make sure they have good contact with the sauce so they'll cook properly. Here comes that bechamel sauce. My mom's recipe would have called for a layer of ricotta cheese right here instead. She would put eggs and some seasonings in the ricotta mixture and layer that in. But this bechamel sauce takes the place of that. And even though it's different, it has a different flavor. It is wonderful and it's so creamy. This lasagna has a different flavor than my mom's, but it's absolutely delicious. And I like it just as much, if not more, than my mom's recipe because of the bechamel sauce. I really think y'all should give this a try. I wanted to use up all of the pasta sheets that I could to get as many layers as possible in there. So I think at some point I change up the order to get some more pasta sheets in. But anyway, you layer it however you want to layer it. This is just what I ended up doing because I kind of wanted to end the whole process with bechamel and mozzarella. But that's up to you. Just so your lasagna noodles have contact with some sort of sauce on one side or the other, it should work out fine. Yeah, I put a little bit of extra Parmesan cheese on the very top. I had some of that in my refrigerator. And then just a sprinkling of oregano, then it's perfect. It's ready to cook. If you're going to do the stovetop version, you need to put a lid on there and bring it up to a simmer over medium heat. Once you see that your lasagna has started to simmer, it'll kind of bubble around the edges. Then put your lid back on, lower your heat down to probably a 2 out of 10, like a medium low. And it needs to cook for 15 to 17 minutes. And don't lift the lid, just let it go. At the end of that time, your lasagna will be done. Okay, see, that is done. The cheese is melted and the pasta is cooked through. Everything is nice and tender and hot. Now, because I'm going to take pictures, I wanted to broil it for a little bit to get a little bit of browning on the top and to get it kind of ready for some pictures. So I went ahead and stuck it in under the broiler for 5 minutes. It turned out beautiful. This is the hardest part. You have to let this rest. It's like a regular lasagna. It needs to set up. put a lid on there, some aluminum foil, something, cover it, and leave it alone for probably 20 to 30 minutes. I let mine sit for 30 minutes. If you want the layers, then wait. You can slice that and enjoy it. I served this with a little side salad and some garlic bread. It was fantastic. Yeah, I really enjoyed eating this. To be honest, I wasn't sure that I was going to even publish this video that I had filmed, just because there's a lot of dishes that get dirty. It's a rather involved process. It's not difficult. It's just there's a lot more to it than my regular meals in jars. What I usually bring to y'all is kind of like, dump this in a pot, put some water, simmer it for 20 minutes, and then you have dinner. This is a lot more complicated than that, and I just didn't know if I was gonna actually bring it to you. But after I tasted it, I thought, absolutely, there's gonna be somebody out there who wants to know that they can make a legitimate lasagna out of their food stores. And I want to show you that it can be done. Now it's time for some fettuccine alfredo with grilled chicken. And in the original video, I showed the recipe for the artisan bread along with the pasta and the broccoli. But in the interest of time today, I'm just going to show the pasta and the broccoli. If you're interested in that bread, you can just watch the original video. Now you could use a different type of pasta, but I love the fettuccine in this one. I like how it kind of holds up under the cooking time, and it also holds onto a lot of the sauce. Now I'm going to be making the broccoli on the side because not everyone in my family likes broccoli, but if y'all all like broccoli, you could definitely put the broccoli into this recipe. I'll show you that later on. I'll let you know when you could add that broccoli. All right, let's start with a quart-size jar. This is going to give you 4 good size servings. And into that jar, I have already put the fettuccine noodles. All I did was I broke them in half and put them into the quart jar. Now you can add just as much chicken as you like. I'm saying somewhere between 1 and 1.5 cups, but that's totally up to you. And then all you have to do is add the kosher salt. And basically what that is going to do is flavor the water as your noodles cook in the water. All right, you can add an oxygen absorber, and that's all there is to the first jar. The second jar is for the Alfredo sauce, and this is a pint-sized jar. And into that, we're just going to put several powders to make a pretty yummy Alfredo sauce. If you've seen my $1 million spaghetti recipe, you've seen my Alfredo sauce recipe. So in there is going to go some bechamel, some heavy cream powder, butter powder. I'm also going to add some garlic powder into this. Now you can put as much as you like. I'm adding half a teaspoon here. And then we're going to top that off with our freeze-dried Parmesan cheese, about half a cup of that. And yes, I am aware that you can buy jarred, shelf-stable Alfredo sauce. I know that, but I don't really like the ingredients of the jarred sauces, and I don't like the ingredients of the packages of the mixes either. I like to know exactly what I'm putting in my food, and this is not a diet recipe by any means, but it's real food, and I just like knowing what's in my food. So we're going to start with the fettuccine noodles and the chicken. So get out a large pot or a Dutch oven and empty out the contents of your jar into your pot. And to that, you're going to add about 4.5 cups of water. It really kind of depends on the size of your pot. What you're really looking for is you want your noodles to be completely submerged in the water. So put enough water, I'm going to say 4.5 cups because that worked for my Dutch oven, but put enough water to where the fettuccine is completely covered in water, but you don't want too much in there or else it'll be just too liquidy when you add the sauce. But go ahead and bring that to a boil. Now let's focus on the Alfredo sauce. So into the carafe of my blender, I'm putting 2¼ cups of water. I just put that in the bottom so the powders don't stick down there. That's just how I do it. All right, and then to the water, you're gonna add your Alfredo sauce jar. So that's a bunch of powders and that freeze-dried Parmesan cheese. And all we're gonna do here is blend it. And the reason I like to blend it is because I don't like lumps in my Alfredo sauce. And also, it does a really good job of just making sure that Parmesan cheese is nice and small. And if it's nice and small, then it melts easier in your sauce. So this is the consistency that you're looking for in your Alfredo sauce. It's thickened up. It's not, as thin as water, but it's not too thick. That's just what you're looking for there. And you can just set that to the side and we'll pour that into the noodles as soon as they are ready. All right, so as you're bringing this up to a boil, you'll definitely want to stir this from the bottom just to make sure your noodles are not sticking to your pan. And you just need to boil that until it's al dente, about 12 minutes or so. And when most of that liquid has evaporated, that's when you add your Alfredo sauce. And you do need to bring that up to a boil and let it simmer until it's thickened. And that, it just depends on how much liquid is in there and how thick you like your sauce. But it might take another, 5 or 10 minutes or so to get that Alfredo sauce to the consistency you like it. All right, in the meantime, let's focus on the broccoli. Now, if everybody in my family liked broccoli, I would pour that straight into the Alfredo sauce and just let it cook in there because that's good as well. But not everybody likes broccoli. There's just a couple of us that are going to eat it. So I'm going to prepare this on the side and I'm going to show you how I make it to where it tastes like roasted broccoli without actually having to roast it in the oven. What I do is I add some water because, it's freeze dried. It has to hydrate first. And once that water has cooked off, then I make a little well and I add 1 or 2 tablespoons of olive oil in there. And then you can season this up however you like, salt and pepper, whatever. And then definitely give it a stir because you want to make sure all of the broccoli is coated in the oil. And then you're just going to saute it just for a few minutes. But I like to stir it and then leave it alone. Let it sit until it gets to however brown I want it to be. I like it to really char, actually. So this is how brown I like mine. And I just left it alone for maybe 4 minutes. And that's what it looks like. Turn off the heat. All right, so now I'm back to the Alfredo sauce. This is the consistency that I like mine. See how nice and thick it is? And after you turn off the heat there, it will continue to thicken a little bit more, so keep that in mind. Go ahead and give it a taste. See if you need to add anything. I added just a pinch of salt to mine. And definitely taste the noodles. Make sure they're the right tenderness for you and test that chicken as well. And this is what your fettuccine alfredo will look like after it's sat for probably 5 minutes or so. They say to twist it to make it fancy. I'm being fancy for y'all. All right, and then you can just put the broccoli right there next to it. And like I said, there's only 2 of us that are going to eat the broccoli, so I only made about 1.5 cups of broccoli. I like to dress this just very simply. Maybe a sprig of basil, some fresh cracked black pepper, and that's it. That is our fettuccine alfredo with grilled chicken dices. And isn't it spectacular? Doesn't that just look like something you would have gotten from a restaurant? Can you believe we made that from our food stores? Oh gosh, it's amazing to me what can be done with freeze-dried food and good technique. The Alfredo sauce is nice and rich and creamy and cheesy. And yes, that is a delicious plate of food right there. And to wrap things up, I'm going to show you how I make my Stromboli. Now you can stuff this thing with your favorites. This is just how I make mine. Stromboli is a rolled pizza, basically. It's very similar to a calzone. It's a little bit different. Calzones a lot of time will be folded and then they have crimped edges and there's ricotta cheese in there. Stromboli is just a rolled pizza, but you can literally fill it with whatever you want in there. I'm going to fill mine with some meat, some vegetables, and some cheese. I'm going to use the tomato sauce as a dipping sauce, and it's not going to go into the Stromboli. The crust recipe I'm going to use is based on my artisan bread recipe. I'll be adding just a little bit of sugar to it and then a smidge of olive oil as well. You're going to need 2 jars. The first jar, I'll put the toppings or the fillings down in the bottom, and the second jar will do the crust recipe, the dough. All right, so I've got a combination of sausage and ground beef that I pulsed in the blender. And then I'm just going to add the vegetables I like in there. Mushrooms, onions, red bell peppers. You feel free to add whatever you want. Now in that little baggie, I've added some of the Thrivalist tomato sauce. It's like a marinara. If you don't have that and you're going to use my copycat recipe for tomato sauce, you're going to have to cook that on the stovetop for about 5 minutes first. Now I'm going to add some freeze-dried cheese in here. And as with all of my recipes, okay, if you don't have whatever ingredient it is in freeze-dried form, whenever you go to make it, you can always substitute fresh or, regular from the grocery store cheese, stuff like that. All right, for the second jar, I'm going to put in the bottom of the jar, this is a pint-sized jar, I'll do a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt, and then just some all-purpose flour. And then on the top, I will add some active dry yeast, or some instant yeast would work too. Just make sure you check your expiration date there. Use it before it expires, of course. And then if you keep the yeast separated from the sugar, it should not activate. It should just remain ready and waiting. So here are the jars you could keep stored on your pantry shelf. And then if you like this recipe, if you try it and you like it, you could make several of these jars at a time and just have them sitting there and waiting for you. Whenever you're ready to make the Stromboli, you'll need to start with the crust because it has to rise for a couple of hours. So get out a large bowl, empty your crust ingredients in there, give it a stir, and then you're going to need to add some water. So make sure it's nice and warm, like around 110 degrees. And then you're going to add somewhere around 3/4 cup. It kind of depends on the weather and the humidity and your elevation, stuff like that. Add a little bit of olive oil too. It will help with taste and texture. Stir your dough and then see if you need to add more water. I added a tablespoon the first time, I think, and then maybe a teaspoon the second time. And then you just want to stir it until there's no streaks of dry flour left in the middle. And it can be a little bit tacky. You don't want it super wet or anything like that. But yeah, it's going to be kind of sticky. That's just the way the dough is. The dough should kind of want to stick to itself versus sticking to the bowl. But this is the consistency you're looking for. And then you'll know it's ready. Cover that and put it in a warm place. It needs to rise for a couple of hours. I put mine in my oven. The oven was off, but the light bulb was on. While that dough rises, you can work on your toppings. So if you're going to use the freeze-dried cheese, just put it into some sort of a container or a different jar, something like that. You'll add a little bit of water to it and let it refresh. If you're using the Thrivalist tomato sauce, you can just add warm water to it and stir it and it'll be ready. If you're using my copycat recipe, you're going to have to cook it on the stove for probably 5 minutes until it thickens. So for the cheese, add some water, stir it around. It doesn't really like to combine with water, to be honest. That freeze-dried cheese, it can be stubborn. So stir it, let it sit. You can add a little bit more water at a time. You don't want to add too much because then it'll be, kind of like wet, gross. You don't want that. So a little bit of time, let it sit, add more if you need to. For my fillings, my meat and my vegetable filling, I started with a half a cup of warm water, gave it a stir. To me, it seemed a little bit dry. I know that's going to soak in that water pretty good. So, I just added a little bit more, stirred it again. I was just kind of looking for something that looked like there was enough water in there to refresh it, but not so much that it would be swimming in water. If you accidentally add too much, don't worry about it. Just drain it off before you add it to the Stromboli. After about 2 hours, it should be nice and risen, probably doubled in size, and nice and bubbly. You can check on that cheese. I stirred mine once during that 2-hour rise period, and that looks good to me. You can always taste it and see if it's crunchy still. It should taste just like regular cheese and have that same consistency. And as you can tell, the toppings are ready. They've soaked in that water, they're ready. And the tomato sauce is ready. I used the Thrivalist, so I didn't have to cook that. It's about the consistency of ketchup. Go ahead and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And then you'll need to turn out the dough onto a floured surface and incorporate just a little bit more flour into that dough. You'll have to knead it just a bit. So flour your surface, flour your hands, flour the top of the dough, kind of pat it. And you just are going to want to get it with a little bit of extra flour on there. And then turn it over a few times, like fold it a few times, and then start to knead it. You're only going to knead it like 10 times, okay? You don't really have to do much here. You're just working in a little bit of that extra flour so that it rolls out nicely, it doesn't stick to your countertop, and it's ready to receive that filling. Okay, now that you've kneaded it 10 times, pat it out, cover it, and let it sit for maybe 10 minutes, something like that. And then after that rest period, your gluten should have relaxed and it should be ready for you to roll it out. That's all you were really doing there, is letting the gluten relax after you incorporated a little bit more flour in there and kneaded it. It needs to relax. Once it relaxes again, you can roll it out into a big old rectangle. And you want it to be somewhere around the size of 10 by 14, maybe a little bit bigger than that, maybe even up to 12 by 16. It just depends on how big of a pizza stone you have in the oven, how big your pan is, and how thick you want your crust. You want this kind of thin. So I rolled mine out until I got it into the approximate shape that I wanted it to. I let it rest and then I rolled it a little bit more, and it's about a 10 by 14 at this point. Okay, now this is optional, but I recommend it. I melted a couple of tablespoons of butter and I am putting half of it down onto the crust to create kind of like a fat barrier. If you've got a good fat barrier down, then your crust will not get soggy when you add the toppings and you bake it. Without a fat barrier, it tends to get a little bit soggy. I put a little bit of Italian seasoning on there, and then I'm going to sprinkle it with half of that refreshed mozzarella. And then I'm just going to start adding some toppings. This is shelf-stable pepperoni that you can keep stored next to your jars. Here goes my meat and vegetable filling. It's just going to pile on top of the pepperoni. Put the rest of the mozzarella on top of the meat. So you have kind of 2 layers of cheese and then the meats in the middle, the meats and the veg. So isn't that pretty? All right, now it's time to roll the pizza. So you're going to stretch that dough over the top, kind of tuck it in on the other side, stretch and tuck, and just make sure you have some sort of a border. You can fold it in and then roll, or roll and then fold. It's up to you. I rolled and then folded. You just kind of want to keep it tight and try and keep the seam on the bottom. Tuck in your edges so it doesn't ooze out while it bakes. So there's your pizza roll. You can transfer that onto some parchment paper and just make sure your dough is seam side down. Now I've got just one big long Stromboli here. If you don't want to do that, you could always divide the dough in 2 and make 2 smaller ones. It's up to you. brush on the rest of that melted butter. You could also use olive oil here. I just think a little bit of some fat helps with flavor and with browning. You can sprinkle that with some more Italian seasoning and then cut you some slits so that the steam has a place to escape. You'll want to bake this at 400 degrees for somewhere between 15 and 18 minutes. And when it comes out of the oven, this is what it should look like. It should smell amazing in your kitchen, by the way. It'll smell like a pizzeria. Once this cools just a little bit, you can slice this if you like, or you could just put large chunks on people's plates. It's totally up to you. But yeah, just look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I just wanted to show you the interior here. The cheese should be nice and melted, and everything should be really good and hot. And the outside of your stromboli, your crust, should be nice and browned and crispy on the outside. I'm cutting this into ridiculous shapes. I don't even know what I'm doing, y'all. Yeah, I just started cutting. I think at this point, I just couldn't wait to eat it. I just wanted to get in there. You can go ahead and heat up that marinara if you haven't already and just use it as a dipping sauce. It's perfect with this stromboli. I tell you what, it smells wonderful. It looks great, but it tastes even better than that. My entire family loved this. I just needed to serve 3 people actually, and it was plenty of food for the 3 of us. We were all very full. The meat is so wonderful in there. I love using the freeze-dried ground beef and sausage in here. The combination of those two is wonderful in a stromboli. And like I said earlier, if you don't have all of these ingredients in freeze-dried form or shelf-stable form, and you're wanting to combine the freeze-dried you do have with some fresh ingredients, that is a great idea. You can do that with like all of my recipes, really. But in this case, I wanted to show you that it is a possibility to make a legitimate, yummy stromboli that tastes like something that would come from, your local pizzeria from completely shelf-stable ingredients. I mean, just look at that crust. This is exactly what you want in a stromboli crust. Nice and chewy, tender in the middle, crusty on the outside. It's just perfect. It's pretty cool what you can do with good technique and good recipes. And I really do hope you try these recipes. If I didn't think they were great, if I didn't love them, I would not put them on my channel. And believe me, I've had some stinkers before. I've tried things that just haven't worked, and I would never put those on my channel. So anyway, I hope you try these recipes. I hope you love them. I do have lots of other Italian themed recipes on my channel, and I always write the full recipes down in the description boxes below the original videos. So that's where you can find those. Now, if you are interested in getting a cookbook version of my recipes, I do have those for sale. I'll link to those things below. I have them in paperback that's available on Amazon, and then I also have them in digital form on my website. I'll link to all that below. Well, all right, guys, thanks so much for watching. It is time for the verse of the day. I love doing a scripture verse at the end of my videos, and here is the verse of the day for you. It's John 8, verse 12, and it reads, "Again, Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Amen. Well, I pray y'all have a wonderful day, a fantastic week, and until next time, y'all take care and keep thriving.